imagine you're trying to raise a family. You're working hard and you're showing the discipline to raise your children and give them a good education that will give them what they need to go forward. And they compete for the National Merit Award and they win. But for equity policies, the school decides to withhold this information from them. In fact, it withholds such information from them for so long that they miss the opportunity to use it on their application. And they miss a very good opportunity. How would you feel? Before we say more about this, why not visit our website, lotusitas.com, and read the article Anatomy of the Communist by Harry Robinson.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, I must say that I read it and I really like your article, and I think that it is very deep in its analysis.
Thank you. It's been getting a very positive response so far, which I'm always thrilled to see. It's an article that I thought would be interesting, as I've mentioned before when I've been bigging this up on the podcast over the past few days. It's an article that goes into some of the details about how communism is not just an economic policy, and it should not be argued on purely economic minutiae, as many in, shall we say, Conservative Incorporated and the mainstream centre-right wing want to do, like Tom Harwoods and people like that. They want to argue against communism on the purely economic terms, while realistically speaking, agreeing with many of the prescriptions for these social justice causes, whereas we should look at it as an overall ideology. And I even put forward the idea that if, for instance, a free marketeer, somebody like a Tom Harwood, only advocates for the free market to get to the same end results as a communist, what is the material difference? What is the actual tangible difference between these two people?
Read the article to find more about it. Okay, so let's go to the next link and read this article that was published on Wall Street Journal. Don't be afraid about the title. It's actually a pretty based article.
All right.
So it's titled The New Structural Racism. In Northern Virginia, affirmative action has hardened into a war on high achievers. Okay, I'll read the article. Before the Supreme Court renders its decision on Harvard's and the University of North Carolina's use of race preferences in admissions, the justices might take a glance across the Potomac. Northern Virginia today offers a snapshot of how affirmative action, intended as a benevolent effort to prevent discrimination, has hardened into an ugly war on achievement.
I will say immediately, I disagree with the idea that affirmative action was supposed to be some benign political tool just to make everything fair. It was always intended as a hammer.
I agree with you, and I think that the author does this in order to lure some people who would
He's trying to come across even-handed.
Yeah. Okay, so he continues. The latest fuss was kicked off before Christmas when Asra Nomani, an Indian-born mom and reporter, wrote a piece for the Manhattan Institute City Journal detailing how her son's Virginia high school never informed him he had been recognized by the National Merit Scholarship Program. Now, other students at Thomas Jefferson High School for Science, known as TJ, and regularly ranked America's #1 high school, said they had the same experience.
This is important as well. As far as I'm aware of scholarship programs in America, they pay for your university fees for you, don't they? So this kid had been just completely not informed that, by the way, you could get your university paid for you. That's big.
Yes, and if you see, these are kids that are going to public schools. They're not going to private schools.
And those are the people who need the scholarship programs.
Yeah. So Virginia Attorney General Jason Miyares launched a civil rights investigation on January 4. Days later, principals at 2 more Fairfax County high schools, Westfield and Langley, admitted they too had failed to inform student award winners. So as you'll see,
this is going to be a recurring theme, isn't it?
There are more and more schools who do this to students. Mr. Miyares then expanded his investigation to all Fairfax County. No sooner had he done so than neighboring Loudoun County reported that 3 of its high schools had delayed notified its students, though officials insisted it wasn't intentional. So now from
likely story. It's not happening to. Oh, we didn't mean to. We didn't mean to, guys.
From 3 schools, we've gone to 6 schools. On Friday, 4 more Fairfax high schools fessed up, followed by another on Monday. So we have at least 11 schools who did the same. Now,
11 schools
Yeah.
not notifying its own students that they've just been given the opportunity of a lifetime, potentially.
just what are the odds? The National Merit Scholarship Program is a competition of 1.5 million students based on their scores on the Preliminary Standard Achievement Test, National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. Commended students rank in the top 3%, while semifinalists test in the top 1%. It's an achievement that can make a difference on a college or scholarship application, but the kids who weren't told they were national merit winners or were told too late couldn't include it on their applications. So as you said, this is a game changer.
I mean, this is ripping opportunity away from these kids that otherwise wouldn't have it due to financial and economic circumstances, I'm assuming.
Well, that's equity. So, given that the program leaves notifications up to the individual schools, it's possible that all these failures were bureaucratic snaffers. But the context offers a less generous reading. Okay, now things.
There we go. Here,
Yeah.
things are starting to
Yeah.
spice up.
That was a cliffhanger
Yeah,
sentence. You know. Public education in Fairfax County has become the front line for an equity agenda that has hardened into a war on achievers, who are disproportionately Asian American. As a federal judge pointed out in 2022, in a case contesting TJ's new admissions policy, the Fairfax County School Board eliminated the merit-based entrance exam to make room for African American and Hispanic students by reducing the number of Asian Americans. In that sense, it worked.
Yep, I mean, if that's what you want to do, what these were always originally intended for, it's not to prop up African American or Hispanic students. It's to push down students who display anything resembling whiteness, which is, of course, just anything about achieving well, Western culture, politeness, all of this sort of stuff. They want to eliminate all of that, and it ends up, because it turns out Asian Americans are the best at being white, that they get punished disproportionately as well.
It's basically anything that screams, I don't want a paternalistic government over my head.
I can look after myself.
That's whiteness, yeah, apparently. The class admitted before the change was 73.05% Asian American, 3.29% Hispanic, and 1.23% African American. After the change, these figures went to 54.36%, 11.27%, and 7.09% respectively. The share of white students grew from 17.70% to 20.36%.
I'm honestly surprised they allowed the share of white students to increase at all. But then again, they are still disproportionately maligned by this if you want to present it in that way.
Now, the thing is, why did this happen? The district attorney has said that there was the superintendent ordered a Mutiu Fagbai of Performance Fact Incorporated to develop an equity policy for schools. So the article continues. Meantime, in October, district officials signed a $455,000 contract for strategic planning with consultant Mutiu Fagbai of Performance Fact Incorporation. A PowerPoint presentation he had already delivered at the September 2022 Fairfax County School Board retreat defines equity as equal outcomes for every student without exception.
Okay, what's the point of even teaching them at that case? What happens if you were to apply that to the letter? The kids come in, you hand them all gold stars, you give them all cake, and that's your job done. Because that's an equal outcome for every student without exception. Fantastic, job done.
But they don't have the opportunity to brainwash them into becoming...
Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you would probably end up making them all fat, which, as far as the state is concerned, is just as good a response. You either make them complacent or fat, preferably both.
Or consider Shona Yashar, another TJ mom, whose son wasn't told he was a commended student until after the deadline for his early admissions application. Ms. Yashar says that when she complained to TJ's Director of Student Services, Brandon Kosatka, he told her that the school wants to recognize students for who they are as individuals, not focus on their achievements, and that it delayed informing winners to spare the feelings of those who didn't qualify.
But what if who they are as an individual includes their personal achievements as well. They don't like to think about that one.
I mean, there is a long tradition that says that what we are doing is part of who we are.
Yes, you could go back to Aristotle for something like that, for instance.
It's hard not to notice that those who paid the price for this approach were overwhelmingly Asian American, judging by the names on the National Merit Semifinalists list published by Fairfax County. Asian Americans at TJ accounted for 101 of the 132 winners, or 77%. At Langley, it was 10 out of 15, 66%, and for Westfield, it was 4 of 5, 80%. Asian Americans make up only 18.97%, let's say roughly 19% of the student population of the Fairfax County public schools. Now, what makes Asian American achievements so resented by our equity warriors is that it exposes as false the narrative about an irredeemably racist America where minorities can succeed. This progressive disdain for Asian Americans is amplified by a resentment of moms and dads who believe they should have a say in their kids' education.
And for all the accounts that I've heard, oftentimes it is down to the mothers and fathers having a hand in the education that leads to Asian American kids achieving so disproportionately. It's not because that they're inherently genetically just smarter than people over in the West. It's that they have an inbuilt culture where they are very demanding of their children. They want their children to succeed. The amount of memes that I've seen of Asian Americans just saying how true it is that their mothers, they're going like, why aren't you a doctor yet? Why aren't you a doctor yet? And they mean it deadly seriously as well. Of course, that's going to force you to get your head together, get your head straight.
But I think it's important to repeat the sentence that the problem is that this shows that the narrative about an irredeemably racist America where minorities can succeed is false.
Oh, of course it is. It's complete nonsense. I mean, the entire political system is set up to prop up underachieving minorities in America anyway.
Exactly. And this, I want to tie it back with something you said before about whiteness, the property, not necessarily white people, but whiteness in the sense of the sense that we have to go and achieve things.
Whiteness is a set of values and virtues and a way of life, which it turns out that when they come over here, Asian Americans can actually excel at. Primarily because they do have a very family-orientated lifestyle. I mean, Asian Americans, as far as I'm aware, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below, please. As far as I'm aware, they're quite unique in that they're one of the few minorities that still keeps to multi-generational households. So even if the parents are both at work, the grandparents will be living with them, so that children will still have disciplinary action from family members who are telling them you need to achieve, you need to do this, but also raising them on good values as well. And that's a very positive thing, and honestly, I do think that white people should try and adopt that kind of lifestyle
and emulate this, Okay, so now these same officials want parents, especially Asian American parents, to believe that not informing their children that they won a prestigious academic competition was an innocent oversight. We'll see what the Attorney General finds, but nothing these schools officials have done has earned them a presumption of trust. I think that, just to say how many schools have happened, and the district attorney has said that they expect at least 1,000 students have been treated in this way. That's not chance.
No, of course not. In fact, once again, it's been set up. Do you mind if I have a quick
by all means.
Interjection here? Because I did recently do a big premium podcast with Connor, which should be coming out relatively soon, which I'm very excited and very proud about. And as part of that, I did read, as I've mentioned before on the podcast, Christopher Caldwell's The Age of Entitlement, which talks about a lot of the cultural changes that happened off of the back of the passing of the Civil Rights Act in 1964. There is a brilliant passage where he talks about the case of Alan Back, I think that's how you pronounce his name, from 1978, and how the Civil Rights Act and the affirmative action quotas that were put in just created this modern idea of diversity. And if you're talking about merit, so Alan Back was a guy who tried to apply to a medical school at University of California in David. He was rejected twice. The school gave him the answer, it's because you're too old. It's because you're too old. He was only 33, but you're too old. Okay. He blamed the university's Task Force program, an affirmative action program that set aside spots for 16 minority students in every class of 100. Back scores on the multi-part medical college admission test would normally have won him admission to even the most elite schools. They were in the 96th, 94th, 97th, and 72nd percentiles. And we don't really measure things in percentiles over here in the UK, but as far as I'm aware, the bigger the number, the better the score. So that makes sense to me. The averages for Davis admittees were 69, 67, 82, and 72. So it sounds like he's vastly exceeding all of those. But the averages for the minorities admitted through the university's set-aside program were 34, 30, 37, and 18. That's quite a drop. So if you want to talk about merit, that's the absolute chasm of difference we're getting. And to be honest, as Thomas Sowell has covered all the time, it doesn't really work for anybody when this happens. You end up with people who are achieving, who don't get the opportunities that should be afforded to them, and you end up with people who aren't achieving being given opportunities that will vastly outstrip their actual talents, and these minority students end up dropping out, and then they end up thinking that they're useless, and then they end up going into very negative lifestyles.
And it's very important to focus on the notion of envy here, because we regularly we regularly hear equity advocates saying that it's economic discrepancies.
Purely economic factors.
But these are children that went to public schools. They needed it. It's not that they had the money themselves.
Kids already coming from underprivileged backgrounds, if you want to classify it in that way.
So this seems to me to show that envy is the prime motive behind this.
Absolutely. We've all met progressives. They're very bitter people.
Yeah. So next link, if we go, this is what the person who received $455,000 prepared. If we go to page 18 of 53, you see how he understands equality and equity. So equality is supposed to be equality of resources and supports, where supports are distributed evenly, irrespective of individual needs or assets, and the starting point is irrelevant. Equity incorporates the idea of need, distribution of resources, and support is purposefully unequal. Starting point is an important factor. Now, if we go also to page 25 of 53, we'll see that basically, again, the thing is equal outcome. We say the equity imperative. Equitable access, equal outcomes. Equitable access to resources and opportunity that guarantee fair, just, and affirming experiences and produce equal outcomes for every student without exception.
It's always loaded with the newspeak, isn't it? Affirming experiences just means getting what you want, no questions asked. And if it were up to me, I would just do away with the entire equality, equity dichotomy in the first place and just go back to good old-fashioned fairness. What's fair?
We could draw the distinction. Are we talking about equality of opportunity, or are we talking about equality of outcome? And it seems that equity advocates are for equality of outcome.
Well, there is that, but Carl has made a very cogent argument that the idea of trying to strictly get to equality of opportunity will just inevitably lead to this anyway. And I think there is an argument from experience to be able to say, well, we had equality of opportunity, and it has led us to here anyway. So it wasn't much of a gatekeeper for this inevitable outcome.
Okay, so the thing is, it seems to me that this is just leveling down. Mm-hmm. This is punishing people for being smart, punishing people for working hard and for being disciplined, and for the sake of what?
Promotion of idiocracy.
Yeah. Okay, and I want to say that I think that this is a weird agenda. It's a statist and paternalist agenda, because it constantly tries to reduce every relationship between people into a student and teacher relationship. If you focus on the examples that they give, they constantly talk about students in a classroom who have different needs, and that these different needs should be taken care of and should be satisfied.
Yeah, I'd call it the maternal relationship. They assume every relationship like they're taking on the burden of the overprotective mother. the overprotective mother that needs to bubble wrap the entire world around these people. But it's not because they, once again, I think we need to point out, it's not because they actually care about these people. It's because they enjoy the feeling of moral superiority they get from it.
The feeling of power they have.
Yes.
In the classroom. So I want to say that this is the kind of education that does not prepare children for the outside world.
No, of course.
And it breeds unfairness. I mean, they're pretty open about it, but it's also interesting to see a further way in which this takes place. That when we think of how we spend our money, provided we can afford it, we choose the best person for the job. This is how almost everyone spends their money.
So how we try to, for the most part.
So this is how we judge other people. When you need a doctor, for instance, you want someone who will cure you. And you want someone who has the greatest chances of curing you.
If you have those opportunities open to you to have the choice, absolutely.
Now, definitely, if things were different, another person would occupy that doctor's position. But that's not... Your clock is ticking and you need a doctor.
And all of a sudden we've got Abdul, who's just off the boat, who's been given the opportunity because, well, it would be very racist and unfair to do so otherwise.
So the point is that if this is how we judge others, why should we insist on being judged differently? That's a double standard.
Double standards is all these people have.
Yeah. And I mean, it's pretty narcissistic. And let's move to this next video, because before we play it, I want to say that this is the kind of education that exists nowadays, that people don't know even basic logic. Let's
give this a watch.
So a couple of people might have been surprised by my transgender pin that I put on this morning. I figured it's about time that I came out and talked about my gender identity.
No.
I am trigender, which means like a triangle, I have 3 genders: male, female, and non-binary. And the difference between trigender and gender fluid is that I feel all 3 of these genders at the same time. All the time. It doesn't ever shift or change, or where I feel one gender more strongly than the other, like gender fluid tends to be. Also, I should recognize and accept that a lot of people don't see non-binary as a third gender. They see it as something completely separate from the binary of male and female. But for me, it's like a third gender. Or I guess you could call it a third identity. So how I feel gender-wise is like a man, like a woman, and as neither at the same time. I hope this clears things up, but let me know if you have any more questions. I'm happy to answer.
This is really quantum stuff. I'm a man, I'm a woman, and I'm neither a man nor a woman.
Oh, I feel...
And I hope this clears things up.
I'm sorry, I feel so bad for ugly women these days, because they are so susceptible. They are so susceptible to this nonsense. They're not getting attention from men. They're not getting attention from women. People ignore them. What am I to do? I know. I'm 3 genders at once.
This is basic logic. We need to go back to meritocracy and get done with equity. But just to end on another note, the thing is, how would you refer to the trigender person what pronoun would you use? I think that it didn't clear things out, and I think Cyprus can give us some ideas.
Oh no.
This is Cyprus. And Clown mentioned not having people use clown or clown self pronouns for clown. And so in this situation, I would make sure that I exclusively use clown pronouns to talk about Cyprus. So Cyprus knows that I see clown self for who clown is. And I want clown to be hearing those pronouns.
Okay. You know.
So if you have
that's the one I'll accept.
Yeah.
That's the one I'll accept.
You use the word I, Cyprus, and clown.
I mean, they already dress like clowns. They either dress 2 ways. They dress like a clown, or they dress like some poisonous frog, a poisonous amphibian. And with that, I thank them, because it's really easy to tell them out in crowd.
So we really need to reinstate meritocracy and possibly teach elementary logic to people. You cannot be simultaneously a man, a woman, and neither. I think it's a simple fact.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as the Contemplation series, this episode on morality. And if you'd like to find out what else we're putting out, you can follow us on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.